So here's the story. Normally, we wouldn't have a podcast where I came on alone without Jeff. However, we taped a post-round one podcast on Thursday night, and by the time Amal was ready to drop it on Friday morning, we already had news that changed. And we are not a day-old bakery. We do not serve you stale bread or stale donuts. So I said, hold the podcast, and we're going to add some stuff in at the end of day number 2. Now, Merrick is away. He didn't have to work day 2, so he went with his family this weekend. I know that's a really lame excuse, hanging around with your family instead of hanging around with me. So we'll excuse him just this once, and I'm going to fill in some blanks just on my own for day number 2. And don't worry, I'll keep it short so you don't get bored of me. Couple of things. Obviously, the biggest news of the day is Duncan Keith, future Hall of Famer, 3 Stanley Cups, 2 Norris trophies, 1 Conn Smythe trophy, one of the great defensemen of the last 15, 20 years. Now, the Oilers didn't want to say much about it because they, I think, want to do something more formal for him. But the Oilers weren't saying anything, but we all know it's happening. Duncan Keith is going to retire. And what that means is, and I think this was a really hard decision for Keith. I'd like to hear a little bit more about him. Just to fill in some of the blanks, like, you're always careful with this information because you don't want to guess wrong about it. I heard at the end of the season, some of the players, when the Oilers went their separate ways, and some of the people in the organization really got the impression that Duncan Keith was done. I think we all knew that there was a good chance Mike Smith wasn't going to play, whether it was injury or retirement. But I was surprised by the amount of people that heard Keith talk and said, "Oh my goodness, he's not coming back." And, you know, they said, think about it. And I think he wrestled with some things, and he himself eventually will give us an idea of what he really wrestled with. But I don't think anybody was hugely shocked. I think they just wanted to give him the opportunity to think about it. That will open up a lot of cap room for the Oilers, about $5.5 million. There are some penalties for the Blackhawks, but, you know, they're not a team spending the cap, so they can handle a more significant penalty next season and a smaller one the year after. But of course, just the bigger thing is that Duncan Keith is retiring. Legendary for physical fitness and what he would put his body through. There's a thing called the VO Max test that all the prospects do at the combine, and Keith had one of the highest scores ever. He was gifted with a natural ability of endurance, and he worked at it to make himself even better at it. Just a phenomenal athlete and committed individual. Also, the goalie market. What did we learn on Friday? This is my second take at this. Initially, I said Sunday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Amal, thank you for catching it. What did we learn on Friday? Ville Husso traded St. Louis to Detroit, signs an extension, 3 years, at $4.75 million. Vanacek traded from Washington to Jersey. Darcy Kuemper not going back to Denver. Matt Murray turned down a trade from Ottawa to Buffalo, but his name is still out there. The team I've heard on Kuemper for quite some time now, a team that's been interested in him, is Washington. I'm not saying Washington's going to get him, but I do know that Washington's very interested in him and has been motivated about Kuemper for some time now. So we'll see where that goes. Kyle Dubas, the Toronto GM, said that he's been talking to every potential goaltender. I think there's one team that told me they counted 14 teams that believe are looking at goalies or involved in moves for goalies right now. So there's a lot of competition. Dubas said he's looked at all of them. I do think he's going to have another conversation with Jack Campbell, but I think that's going to be a tough one for Toronto. And, you know, when it comes to Kuemper, what I think happened was Colorado just said, we can't make it work. You'd really have to accept way below market value to stay here. And I think Kuemper saw that and he went out to the market. You know, I had one team joke with me today that when it comes to the goalie markets, there's a lot of conversation going out there. Now, you can question whether it's legal or illegal conversation, but it's happening. All of these teams, all of these agents, all of these goalies have done what they can to determine what the market is and where it's going. And, you know, for example, in Campbell, there's teams who believe the market is 5 times 5. We'll see. The other thing out there, too, is the situation in Minnesota between Cam Talbot, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Bill Guerin. So on Thursday, Fleury signed a 2-year, $3.5 million per extension with the Wild. He had a media conference earlier today, and he said that he was told there was going to be a 50-50 split, and he basically believes that's the right thing. I don't think that has satisfied Cam Talbot. His agent, George Bezos, was here at the draft. He met with Guerin on Thursday. He met with Guerin again on Friday. And what it sounds like to me here is that both sides are kind of drawing a bit of a hard line. Guerin is saying it's a 50-50 job and you're here and you're under contract. You know, don't forget when Cam Talbot signed in Minnesota, there were some people who thought that was a bad deal, that they gave him 3 years. Well, it wasn't a bad deal. It turned out to be a very good deal, and Cam Talbot has done very well there. And I think Minnesota is trying to say to him, you know what? We took a chance on you. I think Talbot, a competitive guy, he wants to play. He wants to play. He was bothered last year. I think he's really tried to have a good attitude about it. But last year, he lost the job going into the playoffs, and then he started the last game at the end. People want to play. People want to be number one. They want to play the most games. And I think Talbot, through his agent, has made that very clear. And it's the agent's job to argue passionately on behalf of his client. So right now we've got Talbot with his agent taking one side, Guerin taking the other side. You're under contract and we want you to play here. And we've got a stalemate. People were asking me today to handicap a trade. I don't know. I think you take Billy Guerin at his word when he says he likes the team he has, he likes the duo he has, and he wants to start the year with it. And the other thing, too, is Guerin, he won't be pushed around. I just wonder if his path is to let this breathe a bit and see where it goes. The other thing we know about Guerin, though, is this. He doesn't shop people around a lot, but if something comes to him that he likes, he tends to jump at it. So that's the way I look at this. My number one expectation is he tries to let this breathe and see if it can settle. I think if you're another GM, you have to go to him with an offer that you have to think he's going to accept, because he's not going to waste his time with anything that's not close. That's his history. He's shown. Other news today, Tony DeAngelo traded from Carolina to Philadelphia. 2-year extension, around $5 million per, not done yet, but close. You know, DeAngelo had permission to shop himself around from Carolina, and I heard there was a lot of interest. For example, I think one of the teams that kind of looked at it, I don't think they got in there overly deep, but I think they looked at it, was Ottawa, for example, which is looking for another defenseman. But I think there were plenty more, and there was a lot of competition for him. Philly, I think, is going to be interesting. They have a lot of moving parts. You know, James Van Riemsdyk's name's been out there for a long time. You know, I tried to ask Chuck Fletcher about it today. He said James Van Riemsdyk's a flyer. He wasn't budging any more than that. But I think one of the things we're kind of looking at here is Calgary continues to wait on Johnny Gaudreau. And I think it's possible that GM Brad Treliving and the agent met a couple of times here. I think a lot of people are watching Philly. What does Philly do? Because by adding this number for D'Angelo, they don't have the space for Gaudreau. So I think what a lot of people are looking at is, if Philly starts to clear room, is that a sign of where they're going? If Philly keeps where they are, is that another sign of where they're going? Or if they add other pieces, what does that tell us? I think if you're waiting for the papal signals on Gaudreau, you're watching Philly and you're seeing what they do with their roster as a kind of key to where this is going. Vancouver Islanders, look, I'll say this. One thing I think that is true is that the Canucks aren't letting anybody talk to JT Miller about an extension. Was that what happened here? I still think we're gathering that. Great weekend in Montreal. I met a lot of fans here on the street of Canadiens fans who were asking, what did you think about what they did? Do you like the pick? Do you not like the pick? I think they did a really good job of breathing new life into their organization. They're taking chances on a player like Doc, who it went sideways in Chicago, and now it's like they believe in their structure. They believe in Marty St. Louis. They believe they've got things straightened out a bit here. They believe in their ability to make proper decisions. I think you have to trust. They really trust their process and their approach, and I think it was a hugely successful weekend for them. I think other things to keep an eye on, John Klingberg in Carolina. I heard a bit of that. Paul Stastny, likely with a contender, team that he thinks can win. David Pastrnak, first brief meeting between the Bruins and Pasternak's reps this week. The Bruins say they're going to be very aggressive on this one. You know, Pastrnak obviously is a participant too. Does he want to sign quick? Does he want to wait to see how the market sets? But I think the Bruins have made it very clear that they want to be aggressive in their pursuit to sign him. Shane Wright heard a great story that when he was waiting to be picked, obviously he dropped a couple spots from potentially 1 to 4. He got a phone call from Wayne Gretzky. Apparently Wayne Gretzky asked someone for Shane Wright's number, and while Wright was waiting at the draft to be taken, Gretzky called him and gave him some words of encouragement. I mean, who wouldn't want to get that phone call at that time? It's a great story and love to hear it. And finally, next year's draft, I think they're meeting next week to try to finalize it. But I think one of the things the NHL has kind of talked about is there a unique way to do the draft? Is there, if you look at the way the NFL does it, the players are in one city, but the teams make their pick in their own rooms, or you could do it at a draft party. Could you have one central place and 32 draft parties? I think also they've considered, and I heard one of the reasons we're late for the draft this year is because potentially the NHL was looking at a unique neutral site. And Jeff and I, you're going to hear us talk about it a little bit. He's going to suggest a place where he wanted to go. And you know what? I'll save it, Amal. You leave that part in. But I think they're hoping to know in the next little while where next year's draft is going to be.